Like when I found my way into public safety, everyone else's problems overshadowed mine. I never had to go really deal with my stuff because I was constantly busy helping everyone negotiate things that I had in my life. And
life will step in, and if you don't make those choices on your own, it'll happen for you whether you like it or not. It's gonna go down, I promise you. I got out of it after doing psychedelics, which helped me deal with my PTSD and my trauma, because being uncomfortable is my normal. And anytime things were getting good, I self-sabotage myself, because it's like, no, God or the universe or whatever, everything's conspiring in your favor, or everything seems to be orchestrated to me. I mean, it just, without a doubt, there's been so many negative things that have happened in my life that 10 years later you look back on and you're like, well, if that horrible thing didn't happen, this wouldn't have happened.
Instead of me planning my exit got planned for me.
The second you walk out that door, it's like you're out of the brotherhood or you're out of the club, and that takes a real toll on a lot of guys who have made that their entire identity in their life. Welcome back to the Tim Teaches podcast. Today I'm joined by Jeff Robertson. Jeff is a motivational and business speaker and host of the Second Chance podcast. Jeff has a background in public safety and spent time working as an undercover officer and worked as a task force officer with the DEA. Jeff's mission now is helping leaders and teams thrive while facing adversity and speaking on mental toughness. Jeff, welcome to Tim Teaches. I appreciate you joining me.
I'm excited, Tim. I appreciate it. Us being able to connect and jump on, man. We were talking. We share some of the same passions, so we may have to set an alarm clock.
Man, I appreciate you linking up with me. You are a podcaster, and that's obviously my passion, what I enjoy doing. I kind of like to know a little bit about your backstory, how you got to where you're at today. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of introduce yourself, and let's see.
Man. I'll try. I always kind of try to layer in some different pieces of it, but it's when you what ultimately led me into my background in public safety was growing up as a kid. My family owned a store, and my grandfather was a little rebellious. Probably spent too much time in the reckless behaviors. Right, so he struggled with the balance of alcohol, and it would pretty much create, would take him into some boats of violence at some point in time. So the police was at our house a lot. And I always tell the story between the nonviolent side of just being a store owner and things happening and the police stopping by or whatever. And then the stuff through him and just kind of that craziness, different little times. And then, the violent side, right, of dealing with cops and then at the store. But then here's, like 1986, Miami Vice is out. I've been watching it for a year. My sixth grade teacher she goes, "So what are you going to career day?" I dressed up as Don Johnson. I was like, "I'm going to be the guy." And listen, Tim, this is where it's kind of cool when I tell like the little butterfly parts of the story. Was next day she brought in an article, and she's like, "Hey, look, this was an arrest they had made locally at like the airport. They had done this takedown or whatever." And she goes, "You can do this right here in your own community. And this is where I care for it." And she says, I found this article today and I thought about you." And it was like one of those moments of encouragement. So it goes back to the negative. I had found my grandmother committed suicide, and I had found her. It's like right after that sixth grade year. So the police was back at the house, ambulance and all those things. So I was always kind of just around those guys. So shortly after landing in middle school, one of my buddies, who's a great friend of mine today, he was a volunteer rescue squad guy. So he brought me in, at 15 years old. By the time we went through like a little club at our school, and then we both got old enough to where we could join, and he had been there for a while, and then we kind of disconnected and reconnected. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm still here. You ought to come join." So anyway, that started off at 15 years old, which layered in a whole lot of just all the other stuff that comes with it, right? I always felt like that childhood was always kind of the main thing that inspired me. So now I always, when I speak, I'll be like, when when the cops are at your house, there's a chance that you can be one of two things. You can be considered a criminal or you can be a cop, right? So it's influence on whatever path that's going to go there. And I was fortunate enough that just positive male role models would stumble in EMS or this or that, or in anything public safety. I was surrounded by men and women, but I always had some positive role models there that nurtured me through that career path.
Did you kind of start off as obviously you had to get hired into law enforcement, and there's multiple paths kind of into it. There's the reserve program. There's, how'd you kind of get your foot in the door? Because I know back in the day, at least in California, Oregon, it was extremely difficult to get picked up in law enforcement. How'd you get in?
Yeah, so same in Virginia, where I'm from. It's I worked for a sheriff, and it's just at the time it was still very competitive. Not a lot of turnover. When you go into local sheriffs, you find comfort. You got a steady job. You got insurance. You got all the things, and you're a protector of your community. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of folks that worked at our local sheriff's office, and once you got in there, it was like you just didn't turn over. Upper mobility wasn't as plentiful because of the age of where everyone was around the sheriff's age. And so there wasn't a lot of turnover at the top, small rural department. So it wasn't, we're not churning people through incidents and all those things. So for me, so starting at 15 until I graduated high school, I did volunteer rescue squad. We did train fire department, all those things. Never was really a fire department member. Our organization as a whole allowed us to work in fire suppression, and train in fire suppression, but mainly on an ambulance. After I graduated, I tried college, but within 6 months to a year, I had landed 911 in a rural area like where I'm from. 911 was just starting. So back in the day, if you called for help, where I'm from, you would dial a 10-digit number.
Wow.
540-483-9227 was the emergency.
Oh, man.
So remember the old rotaries, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He messed it up. Yeah.
We were just starting. So then when you finally got the dispatcher to answer, you'd be like, hey, I'm at Route 4, Box 319. That meant absolutely nothing because the Postal Service went by that, but then your roads and everything was by route number. So it's a 3-digit route, like Route 220 or Route 40, or so the 3 digits was your secondary roads, and if it was a low number, it was a 4-lane like 220, and then we had in the town you had named rates. So basically, here's the long and short of it. I was on a team that we went out and mapped and named the roads for the entire county.
Wow.
And so now when you dial 911 in Franklin County, I was on the team that you would say I'm at 333 Rock Lily, or I'm on, whatever road. The road now has a name, and the number of the house corresponds with the distance. So if you're in a police car, and all your agencies now are like this, if you go to, 345 Pell Avenue, it's going to be 0.3 miles on the left because it's an odd number based on where the anchor is. So, but all your big cities were doing that. So that was part-time, and then I got hired as a part-time 911 dispatcher. So then it pulled me closer into the law enforcement side, just because I'd been ultimately ended up going to work as a full-time as a 911 dispatcher, where I'd spent 5 years there. So EMS, and then while I'm 911 dispatcher, have moved up to kind of what's an intermediate in the EMS world. And I'm working for our local emergency room and our ambulance transportation service. So, whatever time I had off, I was filling it on some type of capacity inside of EMS. And then at the end of that 5-year term, I had really kind of fell toward the law enforcement side. I enjoyed solving the crime, the caper, all the things that kind of like I really enjoyed putting those pieces of the puzzle. And a couple of the mentors, the guys I was around, that's the work that they did. They investigated crime. They weren't like homicide detectives, robberies, like high profile type crimes for our area, drug related crimes. So then I moved into the road road law enforcement, went to the academy, all that stuff for 2 years. And then I did 6 or 7. I did 2 years or right at 2 years on the road. And then I moved into plain clothes at the task force for the duration. So that's kind of the setting,
Wow.
starting off as a kid, right? So here's, and you'll hear me say too, like it didn't have a blue light from the time I was blue or red lights from the time I was 15 till 35. I didn't understand it.
Yeah, man, you've always, it seems like since you were a little kid, 15, you just kind of have this service mentality. Where does that come from? Does that just inside of you, or is that ingrained from, you talked about your grandfather, were your parents around?
So just mom. Mom was raised by aunt. So I was in my grandfather and grandmother raised me, and then my aunt. I ended up ultimately living with her part-time. And then my mom was kind of a weekend mom.
Yeah.
Never met my dad. My mom's had a boyfriend since I was born. He's been in my life, whether they were on or off or whatever. So he's been in my life all my life. So he would be who I would refer to as dad. So I never, but with mom more than that's when you hit that 86. That's why it's a good year. I could always anchor around it. 'Cause I could tell you, like at 86, my grandmother. That whole situation went down. And then my grandfather shortly thereafter really turned on his violence thing. My mom was running the family store. She was in the process of buying in his family business. And my grandmother's, she is dead. My grandfather's leaving alone. So he's drinking just absolutely, just doing all sorts of just craziness. So there's a point in time when my mom is, he's shooting into her apartment that was above our store. He's shooting into this thing, right? And then he sets her car on fire.
Whoa.
So I got up from my aunt's the next morning, and I go down and I find all this. I can't find my mom. So I'm like the one that reports this to the police. And he had broke into our store and tried to burn it down. And then, so I reported that to the police that morning. My mom had just skedaddled out of the area, right? We had cell phones, you're talking,
Yeah.
and where we're at in rural areas, there's no pay phones I can go. You're just basically waiting for someone to check in with you, and you got to sit by the phone, right? It's the probability in getting your, so ultimately, my mom and I left, and we moved into the town, which is about 20, 30 minutes from where I was at, but we kind of went into hiding. We didn't want to know where we were just because of that stuff. And so starting around that time, it was me and her.
Okay.
Me and her for a duration. And then after a couple of years, her and an aunt kind of reconciled where I could, that was raising me, reconciled enough to where I could go back, and I would ride the bus to her house and spend weekends with her then, but I was living with my mom during the week. So it's like something always going on, Tim.
Yeah, it sounds like it sounds like you had a chaotic kind of childhood, and that unfortunately seems to be more common than not in a lot of families. But it's kind of interesting. You talk about your grandmother taking her own life, and I wonder, like, was she dealing with her own? Obviously, she was dealing with her own mental health issues, but your grandfather obviously was probably exacerbating that. And so many people are in relationships like that where it's just constant, battle, and people don't get out of it sometimes. And it sounds like she should have got out of there.
So, you look at it, growing up, and then ultimately end up going and working in that. He said, rural, sometimes there's not a lot of options but married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And then you get what you got, and what goes from happiness, at some point in time, because back then, man, you got to remember is some of these girls are trying to escape their own hell. You go back to my grandparents, your grandparents' days, they're trying to, they're struggling to feed. There's a lot of kids. You've got violence in the home. You got probably some abuse that's going on, because those were things. So a lot of those girls were it's when you look at people, we married really young back then, but a lot of because their family needed them to get, to go so they could afford the rest of their kids. But then it was, the opportunities for relationships and men, I don't know that it was as available as what we have now.
Yeah,
Just
there's
because,
lots of options nowadays.
yeah,
I mean, they'll swap you out in a second nowadays, but
yeah.
it's a whole nother story. But so you went did some undercover work. How long were you in law enforcement? Total 20 years?
So total public safety, I put it right at 20 years. Law enforcement, I was just under, they counted my 15. So I was about 15. So I was able to count my no in one time.
Nice, right on.
Active, sworn in, just under 10. Um,
So I've been talking to a lot of law enforcement guys, and I have a interview coming out tomorrow from an officer who was involved in shooting, and it just really took a toll on his mental health. I mean, and most guys I know in law enforcement come out of it with a lot of mental health challenges. And how do you? I mean, you obviously stayed in there for a long time. Did you come out unscathed, or how do you deal with that?
so, here's what I kind of lean in. So my career ended with a DUI.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an anchor moment for me when I start talking was when I go back to, I got to the point to where, and this is just me and my own personal thing. Like I didn't understand how to adult. I didn't understand I understood relationships. I just didn't understand relationships, whether it's with girls, whether it's with leaders, whether it's all these things. So I've always just processed because of these little things like where I probably tell everyone like, I probably didn't get right with some of that childhood stuff until way later in life because I just didn't know how to process it. And then it's nobody's fault, right? It's just who I am and how I dealt with stuff. So I didn't mind the reckless part of the job or being getting into the plain clothes stuff and working in those operations like that. None of that bothered me. I enjoyed the job. I enjoyed solving the crime and helping the communities, man. I got so much out of it, right? I had to do it on co-work. It's like we didn't just go and knock on like you. We were there because drugs was starting to take over and severely impact the community. That if we don't really help this community, it can really alter the landscape of this community's success. It's small town USA stuff, and drug dealers that are especially overselling, overprescribing. They're not. There's a lot of greed that sets in there, and then you end up with addiction, and then all the other things that come along with that. Along the same time, we started the pill epidemic, the opioids. They came into our area, and many others, not just mine specific, but like we were working those cases as well. So you had overdose deaths, you had impact from that stuff that was coming in. So just what the job gave me, man, it was amazing. I didn't process off the clock really well. So we drank a little more. We probably, we should have. It didn't work out. And my problem it wasn't necessarily the drinking. It was just the reckless behavior that it inspired to come along with that. Mm-hmm. Just, some of my grandfathers, just some of those things where it took me probably too long, Tim, to realize like I thought everyone else lived in a similar environment as I did. Mm-hmm. And then when I realized, all right, they don't. When I got out of my environment, I thought that everybody else was too, because if I can get out of it, everybody should go there. So I didn't process. I just didn't process basic behaviors really well. So like when I'm kind of mentoring officers or whatever, I go back to that. And if you got some stuff that's boiling in your childhood, just go talk about it. Find someone to work through that. If you got some things that went on, sometimes when you hear me, I didn't go to bed hungry. I may have went to bed scared, but I didn't go to bed hungry. And so even more a lot of cops, because a lot of your cops that come out, they do what they do because something that's happened to them. Yep. Sometimes I talked to Patrick Howdy, I think was his name, but he had a wife, he had all things. He just wanted to go be a cop, and he had a lot of But a lot of times police officers are coming into the job with a passion to help. And the issue you run into is, like, when I found my way into public safety, everyone else's problems overshadowed mine. I never had to go really deal with my stuff because I was constantly busy helping everyone negotiate things that I had in my life. And back then, we're not as spun up on education, PTSD, writing, journaling. This conversation, Tim, has absolutely been keys to me, because I'm not a go sit on the couch and let the guy tell me about your favorite couple. And you're like, dude, this is my therapy is when I can sit down with you, because there's this relation where at some point in time you're going to be like, I understand, Jeff, because I've been on the side, whatever, right? And then I enjoy telling the people who don't know, that are just oblivious to things that go on in the world and things that I've got to see as a kid, all the stuff, right? So I just enjoy the conversation because it ultimately helps me. So to tap that one off is, if you're in public safety and you haven't took time to just go back and revisit, your situation coming up, and sometimes it's perfect, man, and you're all good. But if you have those little lingering things, address them, because if not, they'll carry into a boil. And that's kind of what happened to me. I just got to a point to where things started stuck. Like, I started getting this little nudge of going, hey man, it's time to move on. You made your part. Let's get on to something else. There's life. I need you in other places. And when I was fighting it, because I was like, this is all I know. This is all I know. And then the uncomfortable side would have been me just saying, it's time you change jobs, change careers, change whatever. And I wasn't willing to do that. So life changed it for me.
That'll happen. Life will step in, and if you don't make those choices on your own, it'll happen for you whether you like it or not. It's gonna go down, I promise you. And I was kind of the same way. I was a reserve deputy for 10 years, and so I wasn't a full-time guy, but I did a lot of search warrants, a lot of drug busts, and working with the U.S. Marshals on a contract basis, going and doing sex offender sweeps and the whole 9 yards. But about 5 years, I came into law enforcement with mental health challenges myself because of, I didn't have the worst childhood, but it was rough. My dad was a pastor, and there's just a lot of stuff that comes along with that. And then, I went into the military and I had some PTSD from that when I came back from Iraq. And then just my brother was killed in a car accident, a whole bunch of stuff just kind of compounded, and I got into law enforcement with those issues. And then, seeing the death and dealing with all these people's traumas and everything within a few years, out of that 10 years, within the first few years, I was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't be in this. I love it. It's my passion. Driving fast, chasing bad guys, man, that's my jam. But, I was like, I need to get out of this. But my ego wouldn't let me pull the trigger, because that's all I wanted to do my whole life is be a cop, and once you finally get that opportunity, it's like, okay, you did this, now you should probably pull the trigger. And it took me a long time. If you watch any of my previous podcasts, I got out of it after doing, psychedelics, which helped me deal with my PTSD and my trauma. And I'm not a druggie. I'm not a junkie. Like, I went to a medically licensed place, and it was done in a professional medical environment, but that was the final straw. I was still in law enforcement when I did it. I didn't tell him I was going to do it. I did it, changed my life, helped me out. But when I came home, I was like, okay, guys, I got to pull the plug, because, it helped me so much that I wanted to share that experience with other people, but I didn't want to put the department in a bad place, because they frown on it, unfortunately. It does help. It helped me. There's all kinds of different ways you can get help through medication and counseling and working out and all that stuff. But for me, that's what actually finally worked. So I'll toss it back over to you. But
thanks. You use the word ego, and I don't use that enough, because that's what in the job I was too ego driven. I was at task force work. You get to do that. That's like being Rambo. You get to operate $1 million machinery. You're on, some of the last stuff I did was Learjet to Texas, and
Yeah.
it's a really, really cool thing. And it's just something I knew that when that was done, I knew, like in my head, I kept telling myself, like, once this is over, you'll never get to do it again.
Yeah.
So instead of me planning my exit got planned for me.
Yeah.
I went back a short stint, but when you use the word ego, that's a really, really great word. And it's okay to have an ego, but you got to be able to take that off and recognize when you're swimming in crap too. And then, so remember a rest, right? So I start there, and then, me and my now wife, we had split up. We were kind of starting to date right when I got arrested. And then I go, I'm kicking the can, man. I can't figure out my way. Because since I've been 15 until 35, there's no, like, my life is revolved around action and adventure and lights and sirens and my identity was 100% because I didn't know anything. I can't read a ruler. I can't plumb, right? I can start on my own, but I've done, we didn't do hard labor, right? So yeah, I'm not I can't mow, but I don't have the ability to go out and create a basic company because I can't have a conversation to create the relationship at that time. I'm a little, stung because I don't know, and I'm resting into, those moments, man. And so I was fortunate that I was decent with computers enough to where I understood technology, but I was also, my ego was one of those, use that word again, was I thought because I knew it, everybody else knew it. And then, so I ended up going to interview at this dealership, and this guy, he just happened to know who I was, and I was kicking the can, and he started chewing on me, and he helped me figure out skills I knew how to do. He's like, you don't know, like, he goes, if you can do this, you can do this. If you do this, you do this. He says, you don't know how to associate, dude, because you've been stuck over here for so long. Someone's been you've been doing this, one of the most high-risk jobs for next to nothing. Someone's been telling you what you're worth and what your value is, and it's all gone right now. So he helped kind of kick me in the butt and get me to where I could be a better interviewer. And then I landed another dealership job selling trailers, and that's where I ended up at for 10 years. So a couple of years passed, and I had my son, and then I'm from like right after until I was frustrated, I was pissed off, I was still hanging out with a lot of guys that I knew, and that really wasn't a good thing because we loved each other and we still do, but I couldn't get on to my next thing because I was still hanging around with my old thing. Now I'll say it, you can't find new money hanging out with old money.
That's true. Yeah.
So I go, I ended up at the dealership, dude. So that was a turning point for me through the journey. I ultimately did, controlled psychedelics years later, like way years later. I'm not, I think for anyone who's gone through any level of trauma, it still absolutely change your life. And
nice. Yeah, I didn't know that about you, but that's.
Yeah, it's something that is, especially for our public safety folks that deal with, no police officer signs up and says, "Can't wait to go shoot this first guy," right? No, that's never been said. And when they get in those situations where they have to do it, that's something I found because it really helped me recover purpose and things that I'd never realized. But I was way removed from the job, but still dealing with and not quite having these quality of conversations about things until later, right? So anyway, like that's you're spot on. I wanted to tell you everything I just told you, to tell you that you're spot on in your stuff, and I commend you for. How did you exit, Tim? Did you exit? You went in, you just went in and said, "Hey, boys, I'm leaving, I'm out." Yeah.
So I mean, I started out as a reserve, and I was a reserve the whole time. But one of my first patrol partners was I won't use his name, but became a good friend of mine, but he wound up becoming the undersheriff, so second in charge of the department. And it's a decent sized department, not huge, a couple hundred people. And but we maintained a relationship, and he follows me on Instagram, and I posted a couple things like, hey, I did some stuff, changed my life. And so I just hit him up and said, hey man, I need to talk to you. So about a year before that, I went on for me, it was the worst call I've ever been on. It was a child who ended up dying, and he was the same age as my son at the time and shared a birthday with me, this boy, 2 years old, and in front of his mother. I'm doing chest compressions, trying to save this little guy, and wasn't able to. And it really threw me over the edge. I was already dealing with PTSD and anxiety, depression, and then threw that on top of it. So, I jumped back on medication, and it just really screwed me up. And so that's, it's kind of weird how the universe or God works things out. My brother-in-law happened to be an investor in this ayahuasca retreat that I didn't know anything about it, didn't know he was involved with it, because he's got a million businesses that he's involved in. He's a super, business savvy dude, and he lives in a different state, so we don't talk that much. But he hit me up and he was like, hey man, I'm invested in this place, we do ayahuasca, and I'd heard about it on Joe Rogan, stuff like that. And so I was like, yeah, I'm interested. Did a little research. I'm like, yeah, why not? I've tried everything else. Nothing's working. Medication's not working. I'm pissing off my wife because I'm in a bad mood, dealing with my depression, anxiety, and probably drinking too much. And so, yeah, I just went down and did it. So when I came back, I just texted him and said, hey man, I did this thing, and I want to come in and talk to you. I'm turning my stuff. And he received it really well. He had dealt with his own issues and had been in a shoot a couple years prior, and he was trying his own stuff to figure out. Unfortunately, he can't do this ayahuasca thing until he gets out of law enforcement, which to me is really sad, because it's a completely different experience than smoking crack. It's it's where I
if he could easily, as long as it's something on that list, he could take Wellbutrin. Nobody's gonna
Sure.
frown at him at all. He could take Klonopin. He can take all these other things that are prescribed, and that I've had friends that did all this, and
Yeah.
that I think ultimately just prolonged
the pain. and yeah, yep.
it. Just between work exercise. Now, I'll tell you, you can. When I found exercise, I started finding a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Exercising and working out, and I got ended up buying a gym, and I had a fit bike boot camp. So it was that would be a piece of the puzzle I think that a lot of police officers don't do. I didn't. I overlooked heavily. Task force, we worked out, different group, and I fell into another group that one of my last partners, like it was a non-negotiable. He worked out, I worked out. For if we would go hang out, we had to make sure the workout was done. But it's kind of the tribe that you keep in law enforcement. Some of those guys just don't work out.
Most of them don't.
But it also, man, you build up a lot of negative energy. So if I teach everybody this one, man. 30 minutes a day with shoes on, walk your neighborhood. You don't do CrossFit. You ain't got to do burpee. You ain't got to go back to the academy or run cadence runs and all that stuff. Go walk and put some, try to do it initially to find some good places just in outdoors in nature with no earphones on. But then you want to use that time for personal development, do that. But if you can, that's just as healthy now and can watching your calories in, as long as you're doing something physical. Everybody's starting to preach. You don't have to go do CrossFit. Just watch your calories in and walk 30 minutes every day.
CrossFit was actually the thing that helped me during my law enforcement career. I would do CrossFit on a regular basis, and I mean it's rough and it's hard on your joints and stuff like that. But that probably kept me good enough to stay in law enforcement mentally, like doing those exercises and stuff. And I saw you, I think
like
you were
to-
doing
I
box
like to
jumps
work
with your son. Were you doing box jumps with your son?
Yeah.
I saw that. I was like, man, this guy's the man. I love it. Yeah, that's
We were
awesome.
flipping the box that day.
Yeah.
We were flipping the box, but when you, I enjoy that too. The harder the workout, the better I feel. When I'm trying to encourage someone to get a routine started, like, because I enjoy that part. And I think sometimes that's our desire for a little bit of pain, that because when you're
Yep.
used to, that was part of my problem too, is I always felt like I needed to swim in crap because I'd always swim in crap. And I started finding the right people. It was like, dude, why do you keep doing this to yourself? You don't have to continue to stop doing beating. I had people that come along and help pull me out of that.
That's where you're comfortable. And that's kind of where I was too. And I just talked to my wife about this the other day. We did our first podcast. We haven't edited it or released it or anything, but I'm telling her about myself because she didn't know about my PTSD or anything. But I have a bad habit, not anymore, but of self-sabotaging myself, because being uncomfortable is my normal. And anytime things were getting good, I self-sabotage myself because it's like, no, I don't want to go down this road. Yeah, I'm right there with you, buddy. Yeah.
That's one of those up here, man.
Yeah.
I'm on here. I got to get my arm going in the right direction. But my breaking the curses, that's it. That's one of the main things that I speak on with that, is like just killing those destructive behaviors. My wife, one of the last things she told me when we were splitting up before we got married, she was like, you have too many destructive behaviors.
Yep.
Years later, I thought she said reckless behaviors. She's like, I told you destructive. And I was like, we're going with reckless because I'm right.
Yeah, that brand's better.
That's just one of those things to where it goes back to what I was talking about officers. Like, if you want to speak to my situation, I can speak to a lot of others. I've had other things I could probably pull on. I could put, like, if I wanted to assimilate your story of the kid incident that really helped just kind of like push you in a negative spot there, I had plenty of those.
Yeah.
I had plenty of those. I had plenty of moments. I got investigated for they were trying to accuse me of doing some wrongdoing, got exonerated from that, but like that put a toll on me.
Yeah.
Probably was one of the harder things, because I was like, I'm not a bad guy. I'm not a bad guy here. I'm one of the good guys. And then they were like, oh, we'll look right here.
Yeah.
That took a hard toll on me, worse than any of the incidents. They were just processes of processes. But when they started kind of questioning, and then that's when I was like, wait a minute, do I only belong in this career to where it's like, so I really started questioning, am I in the right place in my life? And then ultimately life changes it for me, because I can't jump. Like I'm too nervous to make that jump. It's interesting, because I'll push it all back there to just going back to what we were talking about. It's like, it's one of those things. So, hey, make sure we've dealt with everything that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Either way, and don't do it negatively. Don't go sit and hug a teddy bear or whatever. But there's been times when you got to sit down and acknowledge, because my family would say this is the way it was, Jeff. It's the way it went on because it's the way it was. And my mom would say that 2 years later, and I finally called her out on it. I was like, it's the way it was for us.
Yeah.
It turns out everybody else was living. Y'all tried to sell me that this was the normal, and it's not.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's law enforcement is very hard, and so many guys come out of it, and you were kind of touching on it. All of a sudden, you're being investigated, and I've had friends who were in law enforcement and got investigated and ultimately lost their job for minor discrepancies. But when they want you gone, you're gone, and when you're out of that brotherhood, for the most part, the second you walk out that door, it's like you're out of the brotherhood or you're out of the club. And that takes a real toll on a lot of guys who have made that their entire identity in their life. And so many officers, it leads to suicide, once they get out of law enforcement. it's an epidemic, and people don't like to talk about it. And I don't blame people for not wanting to go into that field, but the problem is we need officers, we need law enforcement. And
Yeah, there, you lose purpose. I struggle with that. You lose your sense of purpose. You lose your sense of community. You go from judging to being the judged. When you're in the ball and somebody's acting out and you're still on the job, you can sneak up and hail that quietly. And when you're not that person no more, you stand, because it's hard to get involved because you get involved, you're excited, because that was me. I got involved a couple times when I shouldn't have got involved because I wanted to more. So me and one of my buddies talk about that a lot, was make sure that you have just as much non-law enforcement people in your life, your law enforcement, and don't let the law enforcement people guilt you into spending more time with them, because that's what happens.
Yep.
Because I was one of the guys like, you never come hang out with us. They're like, I got a fam. I'm hanging out with other friends. I don't want to hang out with y'all. But for us that hung out, we enabled one another, and we were around each other too much probably. And we didn't have friends outside the job. And the color work it's harder sometimes you end up playing in your little network of who you work with and the other guys, the other agencies and stuff. So we're probably around, I probably didn't have enough people
on the outside.
And here's the other thing I tell you, take that a step further in non-government friends.
Yep.
Because when you hang out with government friends, you're all paid the same. Your money's magic. You don't understand. Like, go hang out with a business owner, you'll find out way different perspective than
Yeah, for sure. One of the instructors who came and taught my reserve academy, he was this old state trooper guy, but physically fit, just handsome. But he's like, man, I do my job. When I go home, I don't carry a gun. I don't hang out with cops. I bike. I do all these healthy things. And that guy, had been doing it for probably 30 years, and he looked good. He sound, sharp as a tack. And that was the standard. And they need to have guys like that. Because man, it's so easy to, you got these guys who carry their gun and their badge, and anywhere they go, they're a cop. And it's like, you're never just a Jeff or Tim, you're a cop, and everybody looks at you like that. And so,
the spouses and wives end up hanging out with each other.
Yeah.
And then, and then it's by proxy, you guys from a shift hang out, listen, it's not a bad thing. Because it was some of the best times, and I got to be around some of the absolute best people. I just don't know if we had enough balance that may have helped me just process the outside world. Because here, I end up at the dealership, and the owner was very patient with me. I ended up learning sales, and I was still struggling, but I started finding books and some other things that really helped me. Because, when you did police work, you did it 9 years at reserve, whatever. You learn how to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
When you move, a lot of police officers would struggle with this, is when you move from the job and you talk to people every day, it's how, well, I don't know how to do sales. Yeah, you do. You sell you're selling, it's just talking, just persuasion. So as soon as I figured out, that was the first thing. And then once I learned that what I was selling was making a difference, and as long as what I was selling I could associate with changing and impacting, I took off from my sales stuff. I just learned it's not sales. It's just all I was a guide. I teach that now. Like, if you have a product that someone's looking for, you don't have to sell them. They're already there. You just got to guide them to make sure you match them with the right stuff. The right product, and whatever that might be, and whatever job you're in or you're trying to sell, it's about qualifying your customer to the right product. Don't sell them what they don't need. If you ain't got what they need, send them who does, or wherever. They and then do that, a little bit of computer knowledge, because I knew how to. I'm not a programmer, but I understood programs, and I could make programs come to life and do different things, and then we were there with the advent of going from kind of those early HTML1 websites that we were producing through Microsoft Front Page.
Yeah.
into WordPress type styles. The advent of social media marketing. It landed, it landed when I was at the dealership, and we were an early adopter of that because I had taught myself how to do Google ads.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Oh,
reading.
yeah.
And then I write down the day that the owner asked me, he's like, I want to get found on the internet. You know how to do it. And I was like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I was confident that I knew where to go figure it out. So when I left, he was like, well, this is what we want you to do. I went and got a book. I went and checked the book out, like how to rank on Google. And that week, man, I was just like, okay, all right. So I went through and I just made myself an outline, like I was playing like cop would do, right? I made myself an ops plan of things I knew that I could deploy on his website. And back then you could do black hat stuff. So I played with in a short time, we're top. We're clicking at the top and the phones are ringing off the hook. But that was what I would tell people. And if you're in the situation I am where you're just removed, and this might be you, Tim, it might be just somebody we're listening to, is don't forget to, like, if you exit from the job and you find something new, don't forget to find those purposes. Layer in, figure out those purposes, figure out those skill set that you're used to using as a police officer, how we're going to apply it in the new job, and then figure out the end purpose. And if you can figure out how you're helping, then your police officer skills will go right to work for you because you're helping.
Yep.
And then, when you do that evaluation, and this is something I didn't realize was I had went through, and here I'm probably, my daughter's born now. We ended up getting married. I got a son, my daughter, married, moved into a new house. And that's when it starts to click with me, though. I'm like, wait a minute here, man. I'm wrong. I guess his life has been really good to me. And because I was so pissed off at what I'd lost, I wasn't focusing on all the cool things that I had gained.
Mm-hmm. Right in front of you.
Yeah. I didn't really. And so it really started to click. And then that pieces started to fall for me, dude. Like every line of life fell into place. I was going to tell you this because it makes the story even cooler. So when I'm at the dealership, remember I got arrested by a trooper.
Uh-huh.
The trooper came into the dealership that day or one day and was like, one of the guys come get me, he hands me his card. He goes, you want to talk to this guy? And I was like, no. Well, I was like, is he shopping? And he's just passing through, stopped in, just seeing, just checking us out and getting some information. And I was like, he goes, I think he's here to see you. And I'm like, he says, but he hasn't asked for you. And I'm like, well, I don't want to talk to him because I had put all the boundaries in place to where I was clicking off, and my focus was with my family. My focus was with this career, and I had really found my groove, and I just didn't want to go back. So point being is don't take an assessment like we would do on the job or whatever, that inventory, and do it often of all the things you're succeeding in. Mm-hmm. And all the things that you're getting right, and all those things that are starting to stack up as wins for you. Because if not, you're worried about not being on a shift with the guys and girls and missing conversations. But then you got all these cool things that are happening to you that you're overlooking.
Did you end up talking to him?
So here I'll keep walking with you here. So I'm coming up on about 10 years at that dealership, and I am starting to get like, I need to get out of here. So I told you I had that same feeling, but this one time I was paying attention to it. About like when I was in law enforcement, I started getting this thing of like, time to move on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I went to I was working, we had to work half day on Saturday, which was just killing my time with the kids. And then my daughter was struggling to, we didn't really talk a lot. And she's still small, but she just didn't want to have nothing to do with me because I wasn't here. Mm-hmm. So that was eating at me, and then I just started getting this vibe. So me and my wife kept back because the money was good, and we went back and forth. And I started going to Fit Body Boot Camp. And the day I left, it's like boot camp. It's group exercise. You're training all together. It's 30 minutes. You're in and out. And I was like, I really would like to own one of these one day. Yeah. And I went there as a member, and I'm, again, personable. You just don't talk to everyone. They was like, hey, come coach. I ended up coaching, and then I turned in my notice at the dealership to go run their locations. So that's ultimately kind of what it went on. Went into the gym business because I really found that, like, then I'm back to helping people individually. I'm like, man, it feels good just to be back front facing and helping make a difference in people's lives like a police officer does. So again, a lot of your police officer audiences, don't hesitate, don't sleep on going to work in group exercise or fitness. I coach people on how to do that and how to make it successful and controlling overhead and different things, or you can go on to be a franchise owner like I did. It's all sorts of avenues because police, there's no, my employees at the gym, when I first started hiring, were all cops and firemen because they don't mind getting up and coming doing a 5 o'clock in the morning class, and they have a passion for helping people, and they have discretionary time because so works. It was a win-win for all of us. So that's where I ended up landing. We opened our gym. I was working for the company, and then we moved around, and they did some restructuring. I went with one guy, and then COVID shut us down. COVID shuts us down. So then I reopened the gym I ultimately owned in June of 2020 when the governor of Virginia said, or July 1st was our first day open, when he said we could open up after COVID. So I opened the gym right in the middle of pandemic. So, all right, so keep walking with me here. So there's a lot of lessons there, and just, we're in the fitness business, we get shut down, all these things, and I'm still kind of pushing through. There's no life. We walked away from one deal, and then life kind of brought this other one back. And so we opened a gym. And one of my first members is this lady. Comes in, hey, I want to sign up. She takes a class, signs up, and she's a member there to this day. Right. And she's always there, perfect attendance. I would see her daily, and a year or so goes by. We have this thing called the Fit Body Games. And we do the Fit Body Games, all the spouses, everybody come out, cheer. Was on a football field, and our team ends up winning, this lady's team. And her husband comes over afterward, just to, like, everybody's celebrating. He's like, hey, I want to tell you something. And so anyway, he tells him the story. He's like, how I made a difference in him and his wife's life. And you hear that, and I was one of those guys. I was like, well, thanks, And he was like, no, you don't understand. He goes, we had a child that passed away at birth, and he was absolutely, my wife was depressed. We couldn't, I didn't know where our marriage was going to end up at. And he goes, she saw an ad for your gym, and she came in. He goes, your gym, man. He says, what you do there has impacted us so immensely. Can't thank you enough. And it was really, really solid. So he and I sitting down, and we ended up sitting beside each other at the little dinner we were having, just a little quick celebratory thing. And he goes, I heard you used to be a police officer. I was like, yeah, I was. He goes, where at? I said, down in Franklin County. He goes, oh, my dad was a trooper in Franklin County. Oh, no. So listen, dude, it ended up being the trooper that had arrested me's son.
Wow.
And it's a little story I tell in Butterfly Effect. I do it differently, with emotion, when I'm outside of the setting and just in that inspirational and motivational style. But it's such a powerful moment of what was one of the biggest negative things in 2007, 2008. And I let it carry on for a few years, man. It really just hit so hard with purpose. Mm-hmm. When life was trying to push me on to get on to my next things, was, there's going to be a different impact that was made or whatever. So it ended up being, man, it was a chilling moment for me, just to come full circle in something that had been such a thing for me, right? And how life just started putting, like I told you, like I started turning and following, listening to my gut a little more, and just stop fighting some of that stuff. And then when when that happened, I didn't say anything to him for probably a year or 2 years, and I wanted to start doing this more. I wanted my kids to get older so they'd understand more about what I did. Yeah. And then, because this is it's very public, anybody listen to this. So yeah. I wanted them to I explained a lot of stuff to them now, and so I want to get back. I want to start telling this story more, because listen, that's a really cool freaking story.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to be able to start telling. So I had dinner. Me and my wife had dinner with him and his wife, and we were talking. I was like, I said, when your dad a trip? He goes, yeah, yeah. So and I said, and I was like, so he had to relocate, and I go, I was like, did he relocate? He goes, yeah, yeah, he moved to Orange, and I said, I need to tell you something. And he's like, what? He goes, what's that? And I go, I'm the reason why he had to relocate.
Oh,
And he goes, and he keeps talking, and he wants to tell me something, and it registers with him. He goes, you're Jeff. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, holy crap. And I got, like, it was a really powerful moment for me to tell him, um, because me and his dad never talked. His dad had passed away between the time he came into the dealership and this conversation. He had passed away. Nothing, he just had a heart attack and passed away in nature. And so I got to catch up with his son and learn more about him and his side of me and all that
yeah.
stuff. So it was that was a powerful moment.
Yeah, the God or the universe or whatever, everything's conspiring in your favor, or everything seems to be orchestrated to me. I mean, it just, without a doubt, there's been so many negative things that have happened in my life that 10 years later you look back on and you're like, well, if that horrible thing didn't happen, this one didn't happen. And it always turns out for the positive. I mean, it just seems to be that way. No matter what it is, if you wait long enough, something good will come out of it. And that's, I mean, I'd like to say it's mind blowing, but I'm not surprised at all because I've experienced so many things like that.
Yeah, I think the intuition and the cops and nurses get it a lot of times because we deal with life or death. It is when someone is a lot of times when people are struggling to find their purpose or to find it in general. It's a really great story. Or you have someone like me, I put myself through. Here's some things I preach on is forward thinking. I was backward thinking. I was rear focused. I was layering in. I was chasing old things and not forward thinking. And it, once things started to click and I started learning how to adult better or grow up or just really open my mind up to possibilities and all the other things purpose really started making sense. So the people that you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, or you're just stop. You're hanging on to something there, and I would really, really encourage that. It's harder in law enforcement because it's generally a trauma type moments, and there's things that you're fighting. There's other things that your mind can't settle down to focus forward because there's so much that's pulling on you from the past. And that might not be the case for a lot of people, but that's if you're struggling to find your new purpose, if you'll really self-evaluate, I can almost tell you that you're something over here still you haven't got right with. You haven't acknowledged it.
Yeah.
Sometimes is like my podcast gift. That's the other thing, Tim, is my podcast gift will leave me with a tip. And it's one of those tips where like, I can't forget it. You talk about things in life or when you're like universal type thing. Like if I get a tip from someone, sometimes I'll get it and it's like, oh yeah, man, it's a really cool exercise. Thank you. There's other ones that I'm like, I can't forget to do this because when something open is a negative thought or something that's not forward thinking will come along and I'll just say, okay, thank you for reminding me of that. I remember this. I acknowledge this. I don't have to deal with this no more. And just acknowledge it and move on. It's harder in shoot situations. There's a little more rewiring, I think, that has to take place because we're just not made to do that.
Yeah. Man, we could go on and on forever. I know you got tons of stories, and I would love to hear more of them. I would like to do this again.
Let's do this. You jump on mine. And let me.
I would love to.
Let's reverse it sometime because I need to know. We can because there's a rabbit hole you and I'll be able to go down when we have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. The first podcast I was ever on was released today.
Yeah.
So I've been on one. I have another one scheduled that I'm going on to, but I'd love to jump on yours and kind of share my background with you. But I love what you're doing. If people want to get a hold of you, get your services, watch your podcast, what's the best way to do that?
Easiest place, go to jeffreyrobertson.com. You'll find all my socials there, links to my podcast and what have you. And then make sure, listen, you're going to listen to Tim, and you're sitting there, and I guarantee you know 5 people that need to hear this episode. So be sure to share Tim's work and all the good things that he's doing. And those are probably the 2 biggest things I'd appreciate.
Man, I appreciate it. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me. If you found value in this episode, please share it with your friends and leave a comment, and we'll do more episodes for sure. I appreciate you.